Okay. Um, so I see a lot of familiar faces here, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Nancy Lex, and I am a knitwear designer. And I'm here today to talk about some of my recent patterns, the ones that I have published since the last Fibre Love Affair. And then I'm going to sort of focus on one of those designs and give you a bit of a knitting demonstration. I used an interesting um, selvage edge on the design. Oops, let's get it back in the center. So I'm going to show you how I did that selvage edge, as well as the cast on. It's only 4 stitches, but I used a cast on that matches that selvage. So I'll show you the cast on and bind off as well. But we'll start with some of my more recent designs. And we're going to start with one that some of you will recognize, and Eureka especially. So you'll remember at the last Fibre Love Affair, we talked about um, Gary Rides, Gary Knits. We Eureka interviewed him, and he was talking about his fundraising, and he had this wonderful idea, and he put out sort of a lookbook of pictures that he had taken on his bike riding fundraisers, and he asked designers, uh, dyers, to come up with colorways based on those photographs. And bless her heart, Eureka chose a photograph not of any of the beautiful scenery, but of the asphalt and yellow lines. So she created, I mean, it was wonderful. In reality, that's what the cyclists see most of is the asphalt and yellow lines. And so I just thought that was a brilliant photo choice, and it turned into a brilliant colorway. It's a sock set, so it's a full skein of this wonderful tonal gray and a mini of this yellow. So I designed a little scarf pattern using those yarns that really honors the colorway asphalt and yellow lines. So it starts with the solid gray, and then it switches to a striped pattern. And at the midway point, just given the proportions of the yarn I had to work with, at the midway point, I switched to the solid gray again. So it's quite nicely balanced as far as length goes. This where the yellow ends really is halfway through the scarf. And I thought this little striping pattern of garter ridges with eyelets alternating with a little bit of stocking stitch, it's a 6-row repeat. And so when you do 6 rows in 2 colors of 2-row stripes, the stripes tumble. So sometimes the yellow is garter ridges, and sometimes it's the stocking stitch. So it just tumbles through those colors, which makes it far more interesting to look at. And it's really good. It's really simple, but it works out so well for the design, and you get this wonderful texture like asphalt, and you get wonderful stripes like the yellow lines. And it's knit on the bias. So you cast on at this edge, and you're increasing at one side and decreasing. You increase 1 stitch on one side and decrease 1 stitch on the other side. So you get these wonderful, elegant tails at the end of the scarf. This stitch pattern is a lot of garter stitch, right? Like you've got these garter ridges. So it lies pretty flat. As we all know, stocking stitch does not lie flat very nicely. But If you knit on the bias with the gray, sorry, I'm reading a comment and I started to say what I was reading instead of saying what I wanted to say. So when you increase on one side and decrease on the other, that shaping will help stocking stitch to lie flat. Because of that, I've been doing a lot of bias knitting lately, and I've brought along another one to show you. Before I do that, let me just put the link back in the chat again. I'll do that a couple of times throughout the presentation. The link that I've put in the chat takes you to a Google document, and that Google document has the links for all of the patterns that I'm going to discuss today. But they take you to Ravelry. They will take you right to Ravelry, but you'll be entering as a guest. So if you want to buy the pattern and you want that pattern in your library, remember to sign in to Ravelry before you go ahead and buy it. There's also a discount code, FLA, whoops, FLA, Fibre Love Affair, FLA 26. Will get you 26% off the Ravelry purchase of this pattern, as well as any of my self-published patterns on Ravelry. So 26, fairly generous discount, but today is the 26th, so it all made logical sense to me. And yeah, it will certainly do for this pattern, but any of my other self-published patterns, ones that have come out through other companies, the discount code won't work for those. But anything that's in my Ravelry store that's self-published, you can get 26% off, and that will be good until the end of the month. So back to bias knitting. It's fabulous because it does that wonderful trick of making the sides of stocking stitch lie flatter without curling. So I designed this amazing parallelogram with hand spun yarn sent to me by Susan Moylan, who's on the show today. And it came in 7 skeins of this wonderful gradient, sport weight, light DK. And I decided, since Susan is a bit of a fan of Amba O'Brien's patterns, and Amba O'Brien designs a lot of parallelogram scarves and shawls. So I thought, well, that's what I will do. I will make a parallelogram. And a lot of parallelograms, a lot of the designs, the stitch patterns follow the same horizontal line as the color changes do. And I didn't want that. So I chose a stitch pattern with strong vertical lines. And so those vertical lines sort of fall off the edges and cut across those stripes. So where the yarn is striping and where I change from one skein to another, that's going this way. But my stitch pattern is going this way. So it just cuts across. I think it just creates more visual interest. So thank you to Susan for the incredible yarn.
It's what you did is beautiful with it. I couldn't figure out what to do with
it. Well, for those of you who don't know, several people have been sending me hand spun yarn, and I have been designing with it. So as a thank you for all this lovely yarn, I have been sending projects back to the spinners, but nobody is getting back the yarn that they spun and sent me. So, Katie got something with Judy's yarn, and Judy got something with Susan's yarn, and Susan got something with Rob's yarn. And that's the way I've been doing it. But nobody is getting this one. This one is mine. It's large enough. I'm a big girl. So this one is large enough that I can wear it and it will be beautiful over the back of the couch come winter. So this one I'm keeping.
Nice.
It's yeah. Oh, and see, one of the things I wanted to do was hold it this way. So you can see these two sides of stocking stitch are not curling, or at least not much, right? That's the wonderful thing about knitting on the bias. So all these parallelogram shapes lie a lot flatter than just knitting a rectangle. And they're far more visually interesting because everything's going up on wonky angles. It's just, I love it. So I've been doing a lot of that, but I didn't want to show you all parallelograms today. Originally, I did have another one on, and I thought, oh, I just can't do that. I'm not going to show them 3 parallelograms. But Leith is also a nice parallelogram. And for those of you who came to Hands-On Knitting Center when I was teaching the class, you would have seen that as part of your package, the class package that I sent. But I did want to show some other shapes today too. And I thought I would share with you Flesherton. There's a dyer in Arizona, Terry Neal. Her brand is Delicious Yarns. Right now, her yarns are exclusive to Tempe Yarn and Fibre, the yarn store in Arizona. So I've also put the link to that store and this yarn in particular onto that document. This is just really cool. And Eureka and any other dyers that might be watching right now might want to look at this because this is just really, really cool. It's a proprietary dye method that she's developed that starts dark. So this is the garter tab where I started this top-down triangular shawl. It starts dark and then gets very light and then transitions back to dark. It's just really cool. This is one skein. There's 650 yards, so it's quite generous. One skein will make a decent sized shawl. Because this yarn is so interesting, going from dark to light to dark again, I wanted to do a few things with it to highlight its specialness. So one of the things I needed to do was design a pattern that would use up as much of the yarn as possible because I needed to use up the dark at the end. Right? It's no point ending partway through. You want to get to the end of that ball where it gets dark again. So this is a 4-row stitch pattern. And you can stop at any point, at any garter ridge. You can see the garter ridges here better. So you can stop knitting at any garter ridge, put on a border and call it quits. And I give you information in the pattern as to how much you need to leave for that border. But if you run out, you can bind off short. You could bind off right after that one garter ridge if you really needed to or preferred to. I put a garter border on it. So that's one thing I really needed to make sure of with this pattern, that it would use up as much of the yarn as possible. The other thing, because it's such an interesting dye method, I decided I wanted to make an asymmetrical shawl. So this shawl is asymmetrical both in its patterning, and you've probably noticed that already. This side has eyelets, and this side is solid. And the eyelets and the solid have a garter ridge every 4th row. So that garter ridge carries across the whole shawl. There are 2 stitches increased at this edge every right side row, but only 1 stitch increased on this edge every right side row. So it's not asymmetrical just in the stitch patterns, it's asymmetrical in size. This this side this side with the extra increases is a little longer than this side. So it's a really fun design. And I think it's a lovely compliment for this particular dye job. And then I've designed it with the long edge here. But depending on how you throw a shawl, right-handed or left-handed, you might want that long edge on the other side. So this pattern has 4 options written into it. You can put the eyelets on this side, as I have, or you can put the eyelets over here. And I like to SSK much more than I like to knit 2 together. So I did every eyelet in my sample with an SSK. But for those of you who prefer, I designed this side with all knit 2 togethers as well. So there are essentially 4 options. You can do the eyelets on the right or the left, and you can do the eyelets with SSKs or knit 2 together, whichever of those 2 decrease maneuvers you prefer. It's only a 4-row pattern. It wasn't a whole lot of writing, but it was a little more than I'm used to with a pattern, that's for sure. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it is an interesting shape because of the extra increases on this side. I blocked it so that it comes up on an angle. It's really going to be tough to show you because, of course, it's knit, so it will all just sort of flip and flop together. But when I blocked it, I blocked the eyelet side straight and the solid stripe up on an angle. So it does this, right? And this side is a little longer. So this one's a lot of fun. It's a really easy knit. And it would look good in other colorways as well. You could do it with a simple gradient. You could do it with a solid colored yarn, and in which case the difference in the stitch pattern will really stand out. And then I thought I'd show you a really standard shape. This is also from Delicious Yarns, Terry's dye company in Arizona. And this is one of her sock yarns, one of her multicolored sock yarns. And because of all the color, I knew I wanted to do a fairly simple stitch pattern. So I did most of this little shawl in stocking stitch. And this is just a top-down triangle, but I've increased 2 stitches inside the borders on both sides. So you get a wider shape and a shallower shape than a lot of triangular shawls. I like to say a 1 skein shawl shape done this way won't point at your butt, but towards your butt. Not likely to reach all the way down to your butt, but it is a definite point. So after I'd used about half of the yarn, I switched to this little border. I started with a little triangle, and then the point of the triangle, I just continued down in eyelets. And that border, where it's just the eyelets, this section here, is a 2-row repeat. So you can stop whenever you run out of yarn. I um I generally stop after a wrong side row and then I bind off with a lace bind off that I do purlwise. Um, I like the little edge that a pearl bind off gives the shawl. And my pearl stitches are a little looser. So if I do it purlwise, I just get a little more stretch. And that's really helpful for a lace shawl. I don't necessarily do that for other projects, but for a lace shawl, I want a good stretch so I can really pull out those points. So the border pattern gives you a lovely scalloped border. Oh, I didn't tell you. This one's called Inglis Falls. I guess I should tell you that. This one's Inglis Falls. And so that little two-row border, you can just extend as long as you want. Just leave enough yarn to bind off. More recently, I knit another scarf with yarn that Susan Moylan spun and sent me. This is a fractal spin. For those of you who aren't spinners, here's a really brief basic definition. You take this multicolored braid, split it in half the long way, and chunk one of them up so that you get little repeats of all those different colors. The other one you knit with long color runs, or you spin with long color runs. So now you have two plies, one with long color runs and one with short color runs. And you ply those together and you get this wonderful marling. And sometimes the two colors will meet, but most of the time they don't. And you get wonderful marling and wonderful colors. So I got about 400 yards of this in a worsted weight. And I'm thinking, okay, what can I make? So I made a scarf. And I wanted to sort of lighten it up a little. So I tried a bunch of different techniques. I did some drop stitches and I did some condo knitting. And condo knitting is essentially a drop stitch. If you don't know what it is, you knit one row with a small needle and one row with a really big needle. Right? So it's essentially the same as drop stitches. You just when you do drop stitches, you wrap your yarn around your needle one, two, three times, as many times as you want, and you drop all those extra wraps when you come back. With condo knitting, you're just wrapping once around a great big needle. So when you knit it back on a small needle, it essentially does the same thing. So I tried those techniques. I did a few different patterns, and it's like, no, I don't like these. Let's go back to the drawing board. And I decided to just use my favorite old mesh. I did it on a garter stitch, and I alternated the mesh pattern with um, garter stitch stripes. And I did different widths of stripes. So I started with a border. Then I did 12 rows of eyelets. Well, this looks like it's the wrong end. That's better. 12 rows of eyelets, 8 rows of garter, 4 rows of eyelets. 12 rows of garter, 8 rows of eyelets, 4 rows of garter. So that these stripes tumble, right? The first time I used 12 rows, it was in eyelets, but the next time I used 12 rows, it was in garter. So for those of you who have taken my tumbling stripes class, right, my odd number was the sizes of rows, 12, 8, and 4, three different stripe widths. My even number was my stitch patterns, garter stitch and eyelets. My constant was the yarn color. But this yarn color isn't constant. It's already a marled, multicolored yarn. So it creates this incredible dynamic pattern. And yeah, I was really pleased with this. Right? I'd done a little bit of swatching, but I really wasn't sure. But when I got it all done and then blocked it to open up the eyelets a little more, I was really pleased with the effect. And I had more yarn. I could have made it longer, but I was so surprised when I got to the end here of this stitch pattern that the colors don't match up perfectly at either end, but they're pretty darn close. So I decided, no, I'm going to bind off here. Um,
You're probably going to keep that one too, right?
oh, I might. We'll have to see. To be honest, it swears horribly at my winter coat. Like it swears horribly. They are bad combinations.
Okay.
But it is,
So
yeah.
what color do we need to make for you to have one that would go with it? But we'll have to have a conversation about that later.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I love it. It's so interesting. Like it really is unique. So I was up to S. I am using place names. Oh, so Molly says I might need a new coat. Uh, I'm using place names, and I'm using all local place names. So I was up to S when I got to deciding a name for this pattern. There's quite a few choices I could have made with S's, but I went with Shallow Lake. Um, okay, so partly because it's sort of lake colors, but I just like the little description. So with each of my patterns that has a place name, I give a little description, usually from Visit Gray's website, but it could be from a town website or something. And I found a description of Shallow Lake that I really couldn't resist. It said it had the perfect pond to play shinny, bring your own shovels, and that the arena at Shallow Lake is home to the Highland Dames female roller derby team. Shallow Lake has 541 people in the 2021 census. So they're pulling women from several places around. But yes, okay, so we're in Canada. Every little community has its own arena. When there's no ice in it, they're playing roller derby. And when there is ice in it, you're still playing free shinny on the pond. And for those of you who don't know, shinny is pickup hockey. No league, just a bunch of people getting together, finding some ice, drawing teams, and playing hockey. And there was a rink. Well, it's a lawn bowling lawn, is what it is. In Streetsville. And every day my bus would stop just outside this lawn bowling club. And in the winter, they iced the lawn. And so every day I would pass by on the bus, and that's where the bus stopped because it was a place to make transfers. So we would always stop there for a few minutes, and I would get to watch the game of shinny that was being played. And 9 times out of 10, it was 3 generations on that ice.
Nice.
It was a lovely little community rink, free. You just brought your skates and got on the ice. It was absolutely fabulous. Um, but yeah, I just thought the shallow lake description that I found just was sort of cute. So I thought I've got to use shallow lake. So this is shallow lake. And yeah, I might keep it. I do like it. I still had some yarn. I knit a cowl with it. I can't show you that one because I have given it away. It was a hostess gift when I went to um, visit a friend for lunch, and I took it as a hostess gift, but it was really interesting. I used that wonderful marled yarn with a solid color, and I used a navy blue. I've heard Eureka say, when in doubt, use navy. And of course, with all the lovely blues in this, the navy was such a good contrast. It was so much better than black would have been. And I used wider and narrower stripes and sort of did a fade. Um, and it's a beautiful cowl, but I can't show it to you. The pattern is published. I don't remember what letter it was. PQ, it was Queensbush. Had to be Queensbush because Ravenna is hanging behind me and Paisley was the parallelogram with Susan's handspun. So it has to come between them. It has to be Queensbush. Anyway, it was a lovely cowl, but yeah, and very much appreciated, and it will be well taken care of. My friend is incredibly knitworthy. Um, on the wall behind me is Ravenna. It's neither a hand spun nor a hand dyed yarn, which is what I promised in my little ad leading up to the presentation. But I wanted to show it to you anyway because it's fairly recent and it's really pretty. And it has a story because I used these motifs, these three lace motifs, in an Afghan that I knit as a wedding gift for the son of my best friend. And then I used the same three motifs in a baby blanket when my friend's son and wife were expecting. And all these people in my Zoom groups saw the knitting and said, "So when are we getting the pattern? When are we getting the pattern?" I said, "You can't have this pattern. These are one of a kind gifts, and I am not releasing this as a pattern." So I took the same three motifs and I used them in an asymmetrical triangular shawl. And so this pattern is published. This is Ravenna, which is how we say it up here, Ravenna. If you're trying to spell it, it's Ravenna, Ravenna. It's also on the list of links that I gave you. And so if you've got the three motifs, you can probably figure out how to make them square. Two of them I also used in the New Year, New Shawl in January. The little clusters and the cat's paws. So I thought I'd show that to you today as well. And now, if I just close the chat and change my view to gallery for a second. All right, so I've got 5, 10, 15, 19. I don't count, so that's 18. So Susan, since I used your yarn twice in this show and you're not muted, pick a number between 1 and 18.
3.
1, 2, 3. That's Eureka. So Eureka, I already have your contact information. I'm all good there. I will send you a copy of this pattern. This is the pattern that I am previewing really in detail today. If you already bought it earlier, I will, you can pick something else. But otherwise, I will gift you this pattern on Ravelry.
Oh my God, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's very lovely.
This is the prize, for my particular show. I have donated a prize for the big draw tomorrow, and that prize is a subscription. So next year, beginning in January, I will be publishing one pattern a month for a Zoom group that I belong to. And I've been doing this for this year and last year. And this coming year, it's going to be different again. Last year we did sequence knitting, and every year I released a new pattern for a washcloth, and it taught, the method of sequence knitting. And then this year we did sequence knitting again, but we added knitting in the round, and I published a cowl pattern every month. Next year, it's going to be completely different, and it's a mystery, so I'm not telling.
Ah, you teased us.
Well, the only thing I will tell you is it's not sequence knitting again. So tomorrow, when there's the big prize draws, that's what that will be for. Today, just the pattern that I'm going to highlight next, but tomorrow, a subscription. I just can't tell you more because it's a mystery knit, but on the first day of every month, you will receive a pattern from me. All right, so this is Red Jet. It's just a little scarf. It's 6¼ inches deep at the center back. It's shaped like a long, shallow triangle. It's 59 inches along what I'm calling the wingspan. It's still shaped like a little shawl. So it's 59 inches across this straight edge and 6¼ inches at the center back. And it's a lovely textured stitch pattern, all knits and purls, and reversible. So it makes a great scarf, right? If it gets twisted during the day, it's not going to matter because it's completely reversible. And somebody is cutting their lawn here now. You'd think they could wait until my presentation was over, but no, they have to do it now.
We can't hear it.
We can't hear it.
No. Oh, that's good.
So you know.
That's good. All right, I have to go back to speaker view so I can see the close-up a little better. So a lot of these small scarves, small shawls that are being published have I-cord edges. And I am not a fan of an I-cord edge. Not because I don't like the look of it. In fact, I've designed a baby blanket with an attached I-cord all the way around. It was beautiful. But I don't want to wear it as a scarf because I feel that ridge under my coat. And I don't like it. So I used a selvage that's much smaller. It's still dimensional. You've got that V on one side, and you've got an upside down V on the other. So they share that one center yarn. But it's smaller than an I-cord, but it still gives you that wonderful wraparound look that keeps the scarf reversible without giving you a bulge that I just don't like being able to feel under my coat. So I wanted to show you that selvage edge. It's really quite simple. If I tell you it's based on brioche knitting, that might frighten a whole bunch of you, but it is really darn simple to do. Right? You're not brioching a whole row. You're doing one maneuver at the beginning of a row and a different maneuver at the end of the row, and it's really easy. But this row sometimes starts with knit stitches and sometimes starts with purl stitches because it's a bit of a checkerboard design. So I wanted to show you how we do the yarn overs between these two kinds of stitches. And a few people have come in a little later. So let me do that. That is, I've just put a link in the chat again to the Google Doc Most of you will have it, but some of you came a little later. You might not be able to see it in the chat. There's a link to a tutorial for this selvage in that document as well. All right, let's close the chat. Turn the other camera on. And I think, well, let's try. Might be better with the shade. So whoop. Shade's falling over. Let's
pumpkin filters. Drop her off in front of the house.
I knit my original sample in a fairly tight gauge on 3.5 millimeter needles. I'm using a 4 millimeter now just because everything's just a little looser. It just makes it easier to knit. So I'm more likely to do it right. But I just wanted to show you the difference that makes. This stitch pattern in the sample is far more defined than the one on my swatch today. Now, you can also tell when you're just working on the point, it really doesn't look like much. You need to see a few more repeats before you really start seeing the pattern showing up. So don't be dismayed if you get through the tip and you're thinking, oh, that's just an ugly little mess. Keep going. Do a few repeats of the increase section, and then you'll see it really lining up. I'm not worried about the stitch pattern so much today as I want to show you the selvage. So I'm at the point where I need to do a stocking stitch block. So I'm going to be knitting the first stitches. You slip the first stitch as if to knit, or as if to purl. Sorry, slip the first stitch as if to purl with your yarn in the front. That's your selvage stitch. Then you're going to yarn over. Now I'm right-handed. I cannot knit continental to save my life. I am so right-handed. So I'm not going to do anything because I'm going to knit this next stitch. So if I'm holding the yarn to the front to slip it, the yarn is already at the front of the work. When I just knit the next stitch, it will automatically create that yarn over. So that's your selvage maneuver. You slip one purlwise with the yarn in front, and then you yarn over. Then you work your pattern across. I knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, because that's the point I was up to. And then I knit those last 2 stitches together. Those last 2 stitches are the slipped stitch and the yarn over from the previous row. Slip stitch and the yarn over. So I knit those 2 together. Turn the work and you do exactly the same thing. At the beginning of the row, you slip as if to purl with the yarn in front. But the next stitch I have to work is a purl stitch. So I have to do my yarn over differently. And again, I'm a thrower. I'm going to go up over and then back between the needles. I'll do it once more. So I've slipped it with the yarn in front. I'm going to go up and over, around and back between the needles. And then I'm going to work across, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, and then at the end, I've got 2 stitches. I'm going to knit those 2 together. I'll go back and forth again. From the sounds of it, I think that's my own guy coming to cut my lawn. So there should be a man in a kilt riding around in a lawnmower out there. Although it's a little cool today, I'm betting he's wearing pants. So the selvage maneuver is always the same. At the beginning of the row, you slip as if to purl with the yarn in front, and then you yarn over. Because my next stitch is a knit stitch, I'm just going to yarn over and knit. And I really don't have to move that yarn to yarn over because it's already at the front, and I'm going to knit the next stitch. This row ends knit 2, the last 2 stitches, the slip stitch and the yarn over. Oh, you can see that yarn over there fairly well. The slip stitch and the yarn over from the previous row, I knit them together. Turn the work, selvage maneuvers the same. Slip the first stitch as if to purl, yarn over. Because the next stitch I have to work is a purl, I do my yarn over by going up and over and around, back down between the needles. Then I purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, whoops, helps if you put the yarn in front, purl 2, and knit 2 together. That's the selvage edge. It's really quite simple. The stitch pattern, garter stitch for 4 rows, ribbing for 4 rows. That's all there is to it. And you just want to alternate so that sometimes the purl is right at the selvage, and sometimes, like I did here, the knit is right at the selvage. That's the selvage edges. Any questions?
I love that edge. I use it on all the precious.
Oh, there you go. It's a nice edge. Yeah, it gives you that dimensionality because it wraps around so you get something that's reversible, but it doesn't give you the big dimensionality of an I-cord. So yeah.
It gives you a
Those
nice
of you who are sensitive to lumps under your coat, you don't get it.
It's a
All
nice
right.
edge.
Yeah, thanks. I really like it. The link in the chat shows you the basic maneuvers, but it doesn't show you how to yarn over between the slip stitch and then a purl stitch next. So I wanted to show you that. That's why I chose to stop at a point where I had knit stitches on both sides of the right side so that when I turned it, I was going to have to purl back. All right, it's only a 4-stitch cast on. It's really just a tiny little cast on. But if you want your cast on and bind off edges to match these selvages, you should use a double chain cast on and bind off. Also known as the Chinese waitress, but people are moving away from that and generally calling it more often a double chain now. But you'll see the instructions for Chinese waitress. It's the same cast on and bind off. So I want to show you how to do that. This, by the way, is the leftover red yarn from the scarf. So you're going to tie a slip knot and put it on your needle. You're going to take a crochet hook. There are different ways of doing this. I did it with knitting needles for a long time and then gave up on it. And then was knitting some things recently that were reversible and thought I should go back to that. And then I went online because I couldn't remember how I used to do it. And went, oh, look, people have done crochet hooks. This is so much simpler. There's also a method where you hold the crochet hooks like this. I can't do that one. So I've given you a link for the tutorial I used, but you can find others if you Google Chinese waitress cast on or double chain cast on. So slip knot on your knitting needle, crochet hook under the knitting needle. You're going to wrap the yarn up and around clockwise. Pull down and miss the loop. We'll do it again. Around clockwise, pull down and through. And now you have your slip knot, a new stitch on your knitting needle, and a loop on your crochet hook. So the next time you're going to go around clockwise, going to pull that yarn down and through the loop on your crochet hook. So now you've got 2 cast on stitches, slip knot, and another loop. Make sure that the yarn is on the bottom. Bring it up and around clockwise, down and through the loop on the needle and the new loop on the hook. And I've put in a link in the chat for this particular method from a technical knitter who is far more adept at showing these techniques than I am, because my thumbs always get in the way of what I'm trying to show you. So you go up and around, down, and through both loops. Pivot the needle back under, pivot the hook back under the needle, wrap around clockwise, down, through, behind, and through the loop on the hook. And this, once you get the feel for it, it's going to become much quicker. And it's not that difficult. And you can see the chain edge emerging. When you've got as many stitches as you need, the slip knot doesn't count, but the one on the hook does. So I have 2, 4, 6, 7 stitches on my needle. This one doesn't count. The slip knot doesn't count. 2, 4, 6, 7. This is my 8th stitch. I can just bring it up and put it on the needle. But if you want a more square edge, you should do 1 chain stitch into that last loop and then put it up on the needle. And you can see that will give you a chain going in one direction on one side and a chain going in the opposite direction on the other. So it has the same 3-dimensionality as the selvage. To bind it off, remember how we were going clockwise around the needle? You're going to do the same with your bind off. You're going to purl the first stitch and you're going to wrap that clockwise and take it off. Then you're going to do a yarn over, and we're going between 2 purls because my yarn's at the front from purling that stitch and I'm going to purl the next one. So you go up and around and between the needles. Then you're going to purl another stitch. Going to wrap it clockwise, take it off, and then you're going to take that yarn over, off, and then the first purled stitch off. We're going to yarn over, up, and then back down between. Then we're going to purl, wrapping clockwise. Then we're going to take the yarn over and purl stitch off. We're going to do a yarn over, around, and back down between. We're going to purl, wrapping clockwise. Take the yarn over, off, and the purl stitch off. It's really quite simple. It's a little more time consuming because you're doing those yarn overs and you have to take every stitch off twice with that yarn over, but it gives you the same three-dimensional bind off. Gives you the same three-dimensional bind off as the cast on and the selvage. The yarn I've been using is from A Wanderer and Her Wool. And it has disappeared. There it is, back again. So we will try to share her window. This is Michelina's website, A Wanderer and Her Wool. I've left it at the homepage because I wanted you to see this. All orders placed before October 30th will be shipped as usual. But she's going away. She's wandering, which is why she can't be here today. She has major plans. So if you don't order until November, she won't be shipping until November 24th. She is wandering. That is where she gets the inspiration for her yarn colors. But I wanted to show you, these are the Traveler DK colors that she has dyed. And this Emirates Red is the one I used for the jet red, the red jet scarf. But she has other beautiful colors. You probably want to stick with one of the semi-solids rather than a multicolor because you don't want the stitch pattern of this one to disappear. But she has some lovely colorways. The Traveler DK is a merino and nylon blend, and it's a little light. So let me go to the Emirates Red, just because that's the color I used. You can see it's 284 yards or 259 meters in 115 grams. So it's a little lighter than some DK weight yarns. I loved the weight of it. I just loved it. It's nice and durable. It's got great stitch definition, as you saw. And she is offering a discount. So Fibre Love 20 will get you a discount on any of the Traveler DK base yarns. Not all of her yarns, but the base that was used for this particular scarf. I'm just going, yeah, I just wanted to double check. Fibre Love is spelled Canadian, FIBRELOVE 20. Can you see this new screen now? This is my Google Doc. Here it is.
Yes.
Fibre Love 20. It's also in the Google Doc, so you can find it. She's offering this discount for the weekend only because she's going away. So it's here, it's available until midnight Monday. And I've got you the link for her website, so if you want to take a closer look at her colorways, you certainly can. Go back to my other screen. Just in case you missed it before. There's the link again to that Google Doc. It has information about the discount codes. It has links to all of the patterns I've shown today, and it has links to tutorials for the techniques I've demonstrated as well. Any questions? Because I've got 1 o'clock on the nose.
Any other questions? Anybody?
Well, I'll just thank Marianne for the kind comment here at the end in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. That was very nice.
Thank you.
I agree with Molly, going shopping.
Katie, don't forget, I owe you a pattern.
I'm remembering. Okay.
Okay, let me stop the recording. Thank you so much, Nancy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's always a fun day.
Thank
Yes.
you.
And my mother didn't call once.
That's great. Thank you.
Well, I was a little worried when she wouldn't get out of bed.
Okay, she's okay. Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah, she's fine. Thank you.